Hey there everyone, and I thank you so much for tuning in to yet another orchid adventure with me, Maria Young. Okay, so now you guys know I've been talking about doing my latest and greatest orchid haul from Lowe's, and I do apologize. It's been quite some time, and many of you have been asking about it, so I definitely wanted to make sure that I take time out to do it. So today we will go through the orchid haul. Okay folks, so as you can see I have quite an array of many different orchids, and of course I did not purchase all of these orchids all at one time. I wish I could, but these orchids were actually purchased over time, but I definitely wanted to feature all of them because they were purchased at either Lowe's or Home Depot's, and they are actually under the company of Better Grow. And if you guys don't already know from my prior videos, but I am indeed a Better Grow gal. Absolutely love them. Fantastic, phenomenal, fabulous. And as you can see folks, quite an assortment of orchids. Here I have before you is a Maxillaria tenuifolia, also known as the coconut orchid. And as you can see, quite a beautiful specimen right here. Also, we have here the Darwin's orchid, also known as the Angraecum orchid as well, straight from Madagascar. Woohoo! And here we have the Dendrobium speciosum, and this orchid is grown in Australia. And here, folks, we have the Brassavola, also known as the yellow bird, very beautiful. And here we have, folks, my most beloved orchid, which is the Spectabile orchid, also known as the alien orchid. And as you can see, wide variety of different Cattleyas. Cattleyas are indeed one of my most favorite orchids, so definitely have quite a lot of them. Also, folks, we have here, this is a Dendrobium aggregatum. Look at those unique blossoms. Just a spray of beautiful yellow flowers. Also, folks, right here, this actually emulates a Brassavola, but if you look closely, the blossoms actually look like Oncidium blossoms. How unique is that? Well, this is actually a Tolumnia orchid. So as you can see, folks, these are my orchids that I purchased over time. But now I am gonna call forth the orchids that I just recently purchased. My latest and greatest orchids. Will you please stand up? Okay, folks, and the first orchid that we have on our agenda is this Dendrobium speciosum. Now, this orchid can actually become quite a specimen and definitely takes lots and lots of space. As you can see here, there's a picture of it in a tree. It really has a form of really becoming bushy. And as you can see, the spikes of all of those blooms, you see, this spike will actually contain hundreds of blossoms on one single spike. It is also known as the foxtail because of the appearance that you get from that spike, which is kind of a oval, oblong, spherical shape and definitely flares. So this is quite an amazing orchid. And here she is, folks. Aww, isn't she cute? Now, she's about 2.5 years old. I'm assuming it may take about 2 years for me to get her first blossom. But definitely, I am so excited about the wow factor of its fragrant blossom that I know it definitely is going to be worth the wait. And here we have the Darwin's orchid, also known as the Angraecum orchid, that is from Madagascar. Ooh. Okay, one thing I love about this orchid is, of course, the fascinating shape of this orchid blossom. Very peculiar, very unique, very original, wouldn't you say? Well, not only does this have a very unique blossom, but this Darwin's orchid also has a fascinating story and also a great backdrop to what the Darwin's orchid is all about. Okay, so back in the 1900s, Mr. Charles Darwin from England, who was a studier of plants or a horticulturist, was studying this particular orchid and noticed that this orchid actually had a spur or a nectarine that actually hung a foot down from the actual orchid blossom itself. Now, with this in mind, he came up with a hypothesis, a theory, an educated guess. And his guess was that there was actually some particular insect that had to have a long enough sucker that could actually go into the throat and down into the nectarine and actually pollinate this orchid blossom. Now, as you can imagine, it must have been quite a riot when everyone else heard this, because there was never such a discovery of such an insect. So, of course, he was quite the hoopla, and everybody made such a mockery of Mr. Darwin, because it was not possible, nothing has been discovered that could ever do such a thing. So in essence, he was made to be a loony bird, okay? And one thing is, though, Mr. Darwin stood on his belief, continuing to state that there was in fact a distinctive insect that was made to pollinate this particular orchid. And guess what? Yes, indeed, it was discovered that there, in fact, is an insect. In fact, it is a moth that has a sucker a foot long that was designed just for this orchid. Okay, now the unfortunate thing, of course, is that this was discovered after Mr. Charles Darwin had passed away. But I guess the moral to the story, and the story that I believe in, actually applies to life itself. Because although people may mock and laugh and poke fun at you, hey, if you know in your heart of hearts, in your knower of knower, that something is in fact true, you have to stand firm and stand strong in your belief no matter what they say. So, Mr. Darwin, I indeed salute you, and whenever I see this fine specimen of a plant, I will think of you, and indeed having faith enough to believe in what I stand for. Okay, so this is the phenomenal Darwin's orchid. Now, if you checked out my video of the orchid show, I actually had this plant all throughout the video because I was just so intrigued. This plant indeed just lured me right in. This is a fascinating plant, and I cannot wait until it blooms. Now, when it does bloom, of course, you're going to see spikes come from this plant, and on those spikes you're going to see just an assortment of blossoms, and it's going to be throughout the plant. So indeed, I am very, very excited, and I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of this at the orchid show because this is a phenomenal plant, the Darwin's orchid. Okay, and the next orchid that we have on our list is the aggregatum orchid, which is a variety of the dendrobium. Now, this really has a fantastic show of yellow blossoms, so bright and fantastic that you could see these like a mile away, and these flowers just dangle down from such neat pseudoballs. Okay, so this dendrobium right here actually has one of the most fascinating pseudobulbs to me. Because as you see, this has a different type of sheath or covering on the pseudobulb. It is actually layered in like a thin, almost silky material. And it kind of reminds me of a silkworm in its silk cocoon. Yeah, very interesting. So the pseudobulbs are low and compact, as you can see here, and it really grows in a cluster of pseudobulbs. Just fantastic. I actually like to feel the soft, silky pseudobulb. And the unique thing about these pseudobulbs also as well is that they are not smooth in its shape. They actually have certain like cuts to them, or like an, I don't know, an octagon shape perhaps. Definitely a lot of edges on the pseudobulb, and you can feel the ridges or the edges of these pseudobulbs. Now these pseudobulbs right here, this plant is an epiphyte, so it definitely likes to grow on trees. And as you can see here, it is planted in a bark type of medium. So this is a great plant to have mounted or to have in perhaps a wooden slat basket. And then of course the spikes would come out and you would just have a beautiful showcase of blossoms. Okay folks, now this is like our treasured find of the day. Okay, I found this at Lowe's for $6.98, and this is a Tolumnia orchid. And as you can see, the foliage on here has a very sharp edge and it's very slim. It reminds me of the Brassavola foliage. Now, if we go upwards, we will find that the blossoms actually emulate the Oncidium orchids or the dancing lady orchids. Now this is actually called the Tequila Sunrise. A yummy, yummy name. And as you can see, such a variation of color in the blossoms. Okay, so we have a blossom here that the outer edge and majority of the blossom is actually more of a yellow with, of course, a spray of fuchsia color. And then if we go upwards right here, now we have a blossom right here that looks to be having an outer white rim and more of a fuchsia color petal or skirt. And if we take a look up here, this actually gives off a yellowish kind of orangey tinge. And of course, again, that fuchsia sprayed skirt. So definitely as you look throughout the flowers, you'll see a variation of color, even though it is the same plant. So very, very beautiful to view, of course. Now this Tolumnia actually is found in the Caribbean, and they are actually found not really within the tree but on the outer edges of the branches of the tree on twigs, because this plant really likes to go on the furthest limb or the branch or twig to find its nourishment and to also get the best sunlight. So indeed, this is a bright light orchid. Of course, not direct sunlight, because direct sunlight can really prove to be harmful to orchids, but they do like very, very bright light. Okay, so now another thing that I really liked about this orchid right here is the fact that, as you can see, there are actually 3 spikes. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and as I looked further into the foliage or the base of the foliage, I also seen that there were several spikes that had been cut. So therefore this has already bloomed several spikes. And I actually counted 4 spikes that had already been cut. So altogether thus far on this plant, there's already been 7 spikes. So that leads me to believe and know in my knower that this is indeed a profusive bloomer. And with each new growth, you will indeed find that a spike will shoot up from that new growth. Now, as you guys know, I'm starting to get quite the collection of Cattleyas. They are one of my most favorite orchids in the whole wide world, and I really cannot get enough of their beautiful blossoms. But sad to say, folks, I am going to have to get enough of their beautiful blossoms because I'm really going to put a cap on getting any more Cattleyas, at least for this year. Because as you guys can see, I'm really trying to broaden my horizon when it comes to just different varieties of exotic orchids. So definitely I'm gonna have to put a pause on the Cattleyas, but you guys know, once you fall in love with a Cattleya, you can never shake that love. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this orchid haul, and I thank you so much that you would spend this precious time with me, folks.